The Temple of Oralin. Nawani's white hooded robe ruffled and flapped in the stiff breeze as she led Solana quickly through the ominous streets of Atlantis. They halted at last in front of a large, imposing white-domed temple. Above its immense portal was carved in the word Oralin. Armed guards stood at alert attention before the massive doors. Climbing the steps rapidly, Namwani flung back her hood as she reached the top stair. The guards bowed to her in recognition, and one of the doors swung open to admit her and Solana, who kept closely to her side. Inside they were greeted by several priestesses who bowed to them respectfully, while giggling and murmuring to themselves. Another one ushered them into the great hall. This was located inside the large domed portion of the temple. Solana gazed up at the high ceiling and noted with interest that it was painted a brilliant cobalt blue-violet sprinkled with shining gold and silver stars. Truly it appeared to be a map of the heavens, but contained far more star formations than Solana had ever before seen. He stood transfixed looking up at the inside of the dome. Two young women came rushing into the great hall, bubbling with excitement. Solana turned to look at them. One was strikingly beautiful and bore a strong resemblance to Namuani. Her eyes had some unusual quality to them. What was it? Solana glanced upwards again quickly and confirmed his observation. Yes, her eyes were like stars. This woman rushed to tightly embrace Namuani. The other woman had long golden hair, was slender as a reed, with an aura of remarkable depth and self-contentment. Hermione beamed to the visitor from Anne. "Come here, Solana. I wish to introduce you to my daughter Novasna." Novasna turned her sparkling, starry eyes upon Solana and bowed gracefully to him. "I am honored to meet you, Seer. I would like to present you my temple sister Avalin. She is a very close friend of my brother Onion, who is one of the makers now," Novasna explained with great friendliness. At the mention of her son, a cloud of concern covered Namani's face. "How is Onion faring these days?" she inquired of Avalin. "Not so well, I'm afraid," Avalin responded. "I am having a difficult time with him. You know how deeply we love each other, but now we spend most of our time together arguing. He, like many of the makers, has lost all his perspective of the secret nature of the forces, which they are indiscriminately unleashing through their experiments. Increasingly, Onion craves more power and control regardless of its consequences on the human level. He even now speaks of his own grandfather Dr. Z as an enemy of Atlantis who must be removed because he is hindering progress in technology." Evelyn shook her head sadly. "I simply do not know if I can get through to him anymore. I've certainly tried." Hermione embraced her affectionately. "I know that you have, so have I, but he barely sees me anymore. There is so much of the wild energy and brilliant genius of his father dabbled in him. Evelyn, you must know that I am most grateful for your constant attempts to help him. I only wish that I could do more. It is as tough a crazy disease has possessed many of our makers. We will be fortunate if they don't destroy everything here," observed Evelyn, who then paused and turned to Solana. "Sir, I have heard that you hail originally from Lemuria. You there of a high king named Althazar?" "Yes, I knew him well. He was my closest friend," Solana replied evenly, while experiencing intense surprise at hearing Althazar's name spoken here. "After the sinking of Lemuria, we traveled together from my island of Rapa Nui to a terrible place called Tivaku. It was an ancient ceremonial center near the kingdom of An. It was there that were sadly parted," Solana's words faltered. "Know you then that his wife Diandra resides here in Atlantis?" Avarin asked. "No, I knew that not," Solana said with much astonishment. "How can that be? Did she not die when Lemuria was destroyed?" Nomani explained to him. "Diandra was forcibly teleported here at the time of the motherland's demise by her brother Davod. who was my son Anion's father. David lost his life for that, for he did it without permission of the Brotherhood of the Seven, and without full knowledge of the teleportation process. Oh, if only Althazar had known that Giander survived, it would have saved him, Solana lamented. She did not make the transition here unharmed, Evelyn added softly. Solana could see that she cared deeply for Giander. Her memory did not return. She lives in this very temple, but spends each day sitting silently on the shore of the great ocean, gazing westward out to sea. She speaks no longer to people, but only to the many seabirds which flock to her. I myself go to her every evening and bring her back to the temple and make sure that she eats something. You see, many years ago, when as a small child I entered the temple of Oralin and was placed into her care. She was as a mother to me. Now I do what I can for her. Solana felt his heart about to burst into pieces. If only Altazar or Deandra had known that the other was still alive, their sufferings could have been averted. He thought. He asked Davalin, "Could you possibly take me to see Deandra?" The priestess looked at him keenly and felt his sincerity. "Yes, I shall be pleased to do so. I could accompany you right now. Allura is in the midst of some important conferences and cannot see you until they are completed, and I'm sure that Navasna and her mother would enjoy the opportunity to visit each other, right?" The two women nodded in agreement. Donning a purple hooded robe, Evelyn took Solana with her down to the ocean. The beach was composed of finest white sand. Solana spied some exquisite shells lying about. Picking some up, he tucked them into his robe, thinking how much the sea air reminded him of his island home. They walked towards a steep cliff which loomed over a rocky point, jutting sharply into the ocean. There underneath the base of the cliff sat a solitary woman, dressed in a deep purple robe. Her long hair was silver now and blew loosely about in the sea breeze. Although she was no longer young, her face was so beautiful with those magnificent huge eyes and cheekbones. A certain haunted vacancy of expression emanated, purity and sad innocence that touched Solana deeply. Evelyn and Solana sat down beside her on the rocky ledge. Diana turned towards them with an air of incomprehension, then quietly returned her gaze to the sea. Evelyn gestured to Solana to speak if he wished. He composed himself as best he could. "So here is the wife of Balthazar whom I have heard so much about," he thought incredulously. Solana watched her keenly, trying to ascertain what degree of conscious awareness Diandra really had. A fleeting thought nudged his mind that possibly she was far more alert than she appeared. Perhaps Diandra had simply chosen not to be bothered by the commonplaces of life any more. But that thought quickly passed by as Solana noted her absolute lack of expression or reaction to their presence. His voice was gentle, but tides of emotion rose and fell within him as he prepared to speak. "Greeting to you, Diandra, wife of Balthazar. My name is Solana. I hail from the Lemurian island of Rapa Nui, where your husband was sent at the time of the Malround's completion." Diana turned her blank expression toward him and stared without the slightest hint of recognition that his words were being understood. Solana began again. "Your husband and I sailed forth together from my island trying to reach Atlantis." His voice almost broke down as he thought how Balthazar should be here with him right now. Balthazar loved you very much. He was filled with grief and guilt because he assumed that you had been destroyed along with his entire homeland. May the hermit caution all of you at this moment about the dangers of making false assumptions. Please accept the fact that we are rarely given more than a few fragments of the entire picture. Solana continued. Balthazar no longer wished to live. He did not want to be the sole Lemurian survivor, but he tried to fulfill his duty and journey to Atlantis as my priest on Rapa Nui had charged him. Solana stared deeply into Deandra's unresponsive eyes, trying to penetrate the veils of her awareness. Something within her had sealed itself shut. If only he could reach her. Looking at Deandra, he could see vestiges of her former magnificence. What a splendid partnership Deandra and Altazar would make. They were truly equals on every level of their beings. No wonder Altazar had been profoundly devastated. Solana felt a deep regret that Altazar had not made the journey to Atlantis. Surely he could have healed Deandra. And if he had only known that Deandra was alive in Atlantis, he would not have been trapped by Mura. Solana returned from his silent thoughts and continued slowly. Due to unfortunate circumstances, I was parted from Altazar many years ago, and know not of his present whereabouts. I want you to know that your husband was a true friend to me, and we shared many of our private thoughts. I can only tell you, Gianra, that Altazar loved you above all others, and would have gladly sacrificed his life for yours. At last, overwhelmed by his emotions, Solana could speak no more. Bowing to Gianra, he stood up to go. The woman continued to stare back at him without a word. Evelyn bowed to Deandra as well, and the two of them gently departed. Deandra sat unmoving and ever silent until they were gone. The waves pounded relentlessly upon the rocks with a steady rhythm. A few seabirds made their way back to her and perched upon her lap. The air was filled with the smell of salt and drying seaweed. Slowly, very slowly, Deandra's lips moved as she quietly spoke the word Alcazar. A large tear emerged from her eye and slid down her cheek. Yet another appeared, and yet another. She murmured over and over, Alcazar, Alcazar, Alcazar. The tears fell steadily, but she moved not. The tears rained down Deandra's face as a small portion of her woke and began to remember. The evacuation. For 3 days they had been silently slipping past the guards into the temple of Oralin for their private audience with Oralin. The high priestess had sent out her summons with secret messengers who had combed Atlantis seeking out the chosen ones. Each individual audience did not last long, yet as the summoned ones departed the temple, a profound change could be perceived in them. There was a new seriousness of purpose as well as an aura of shock around those departing ones. Solana sat patiently in the temple, waiting for the moment of his meeting with Aurora. Finally he, too, was called forth and ushered into the smaller domed temple room where she was to receive him. This dome was composed of some sort of crystalline substance, which gave it a quality of semi-transparency. Through the walls he could faintly see the shadows of flowers and trees slightly swaying in the breeze. It was an altogether unusual effect which lent an air of superdimensionality to the entire room. Alora soon entered and approached Solana with a radiant smile. She spoke not, but merely extended her hands to him, palms down over his, which he quickly placed palms up. Solana felt a wave of energy surge through him. Soon he saw the ancient ones of An sitting side by side, watching him carefully with loving concern. He saw the hermit gazing into her crystals as she slowly fused into a crystal herself. Next he experienced Soluna sitting beside a small pool, lined with white rocks, where he had stopped and refreshed himself on his journey to the hermit. Solana leaned forward to look at her reflection in the water. Instead of seeing herself, she saw Solana, looking back at her just this very moment in time. Kissing the tip of her finger, she touched the mouth of his water reflection with it. Instantly, Solana felt her cool finger touch his lips. Then the scene changed, and she saw a small boy living in the jungle, running around with a primitive bow and arrow. He could not make out the significance of this vision or the identity of the child. Solana was now taken to a large cavern which seems to be located high above in the heavens. Banks of white candles burned constantly as a low chanting filled the air with a sense of timeless peace. Hooded white-robed figures walk above with graceful reverence. "Welcome to the house of Ogmin," spoke a voice coming through Solana's mind. Even though he could not clearly perceive the faces of the others present, Solana felt that they were all well known to him, some sort of close kin. A figure stood gracefully at the head of the cavern, a most unusual being in a body composed solely of light. Solana had the distinct impression that this form was not a necessary part of this being, but served only to facilitate its communication with others. It gave them something to focus on. The star being's long-tapered, four-fingered hands moved expressively. The name Xeron impressed itself upon Solana's consciousness. Xeron began a discourse with all those present. It was termed the crystal transmission. It was given not with words, but was received through crystals that each of them had implanted within their throat chakras. Solana received much useful information during the transmission. He saw the long covered wooden ships lying in wait in the secluded Atlantic Bay. He was given his orders to go to his assigned vessel before the following evening. Solana saw clearly who had been chosen to depart and who would remain. There seems to be nearly 100 ships at the ready, yet part of him knew that very few of them would make it successfully to their appointed destinations. Certain Atlanteans would be evacuated, of that he was quite certain. There would inevitably be some heart-ending separations, yet these orders could not be questioned or changed. After a while, Xeron began beaming messages of a more individual nature to Solana, who had the impression that the others were also simultaneously receiving their personal instruction within this identical moment. Slowly, the hosts of Hawkmin began to fade away. Solana knew that they did truly exist somewhere in a dimension far beyond time, and that now the connection had been made. He would be able to return there at will, for did not part of him reside there always? Solana looked now at Alora, whose rare beauty could not be compared to any earthly values, and noticed her silver breastplate sparkled with real stars. Her starry eyes twinkled at him with celestial wisdom. She then handed him a sealed envelope. "These are the secret orders for vessel number 11. Open this once you reach high sea, for they shall reveal your destination and further purpose. Peace be with you, Solana, priest of Rapa Nui and son of An. Forget not the Ogmin, for you are one of them." Alora touched him lightly upon his heart and was gone. Solana practically floated back to the great hall and sat there quietly by himself as Namani was next summoned by Alora. In a short time Namani returned in tears. The daughter Navasna walked beside her, holding her in support. The two women cried freely and embraced each other as they fought the last time. Finally Namani signaled to Solana that she was ready to depart. Pulling their hoods up, they left the temple of Oralin, walking rapidly and soundlessly to the temple of Enora. Hastily mounting its white marble steps, they entered its portals with relief. Inside they were greeted anxiously by Vanel and Dr. Zed. Namani flung herself sobbing into Vanel's arms. He held her tightly and comforted her as best he could. "Why?" she cried. "Why, Vanel? Why? The Master Vanna looked at her with real compassion and deep love. You know why, Anami, because if the slightest chance exists that I can avert the catastrophe which threatens our homeland, then I shall stay. Then I must stay. How can anyone measure one small human life against the possibility of saving the world? But they would not be sending us forth if we were not on the brink of an unavoidable disaster, Amani implored passionately. I must stay. If I can but find the master sound, all negativity will be transmuted and Atlantis shall be saved, explained Warner with an air of tragic resignation. He looked completely exhausted. The endless night without sleep had taken their toll. Even though he was a large boned man, he was developing gauntness and somewhat emaciated transparency that had not been there before. I love you, Namwani, that you well know. We have shared many full years together. Do not ask for more from me. I have been blessed with a long and full life. The small amount of it that remains I place in the surface of Atlantis. It is not much, but I must see it through. Please, dear woman, release me with your vow to fulfill my final duties. You must fulfill yours. Vanel put her close to him and they clung to each other as they shared their tears. During this conversation, Dr. Z had motioned Solana aside and they stepped into an inner courtyard. "And what are your plans, Dr. Z?" Solana inquired respectfully, realizing that he had grown quite fond of his new Atlantean friends. "I too am bound to see it through to the end. I will not leave the magnetic grid unprotected. But worry not about me. I have more means at my disposal than anyone suspects." Dr. Z flashed a hint of a smile. "I still have quite an arsenal of surprise that could be used." Dropping his voice to a low whisper, he said, "Solana, my daughter will be traveling with you on the same vessel. Please watch over her for me." Solana assured him, "Of course I will. That goes without saying. I feel that you are all part of my truly family. I hereby pledge to protect and aid Namuni in any way that I can. I shall also hold you and Vanna in my constant prayers." The next morning was filled with tender farewells. At last Namani and Solana had readied themselves to depart the temple of Enora for the final time. Dr. Z stood silently watching his daughter and felt himself gripped with strong emotion. Vanna and Namani said their last goodbyes, kissed their final kiss, and released each other with love to their now separate destinies. Solana and Namwani finally departed the temple and began their journey to the isolated harbor on the far side of the island, which was the secret rendezvous point. By the time that they arrived there it was late afternoon. The ships could be seen bobbing gently in the calm waters. There were nearly 100 of them, long, low, covered wooden boats with rows of oars protruding from each side. A crowd of people had gathered and were forming into groups that belonged to each vessel. One person from each ship had been chosen as leader by Alora, and each of them, like Solana, carried the sealed orders as to their final destination and next level of work. Naman and Lovasna had found each other and were saying their sweet farewells. Lovasna had arrived here with Oralin. The priestess Diana had been left behind in Atlantis, but Oralin had arranged for her care with the temple sisters who would remain. Then the ships began to be quietly loaded. Lines of people patiently awaited their turn to board. Slowly, one by one, the vessels rowed out into the ocean. They rowed further and further until only small specks could be seen upon the now darkened horizon. Thus it was that Atlantis did discharge its finest unto the four corners of the earth before the hour of doom. Thus they rowed against time, constantly spelling each other the oars, pausing neither for sleep nor for the contemplation of all that they had left behind. The sealed orders were duly opened and read as the covered ship and read as the covered ship moved purposefully towards their assigned directions. And still they rowed, knowing that there was little time, that the march of destiny waited for no one. The vessels bravely rolled on without any time or space for fear or doubt. They spread out upon the vast waters of the great ocean like a colony of tiny ants. Thought it came upon that the end of Atlantis did draw near. How it actually happened was through treachery. First, the Master Wanner was tricked into a meeting outside the temple of Enora by Enion and was murdered by some of the corrupted makers. Enion shall tell us more of how this was done in the epilogue to our story. Somehow Dr. Z was made to relinquish the key to the magnetic grid. No one knows how or why this was done. It is a mystery as to whether he was forced to give it or gave it voluntarily to them. Some speak of him bitterly as a traitor. Others search still for an explanation, but this was we know for certain. Dr. Z disappeared without trace just before the end. The final destruction was caused by a sound, as Funnel had foreseen and tried to prevent. When this terrible sound was created, the great crystal was overcharged and blew up. The thunder of massive explosion was heard for countless thousands of miles. Thus the buildings of Atlantis began to topple. The earth shook and crackled into pieces. Gigantic waves rolled in from the great ocean and swallowed fair Atlantis in angry gulps. The populace rushed here and there, utterly abandoning themselves to absolute panic. But there was no place for them that was safe. The desperate screams were drowned out by the relentless pounding of the malevolent waves until finally there were no more cries. Then our beautiful Atlantis heaved and turned and fragmented and sank. Save for a few volcanic peaks, Atlantis could be seen no more upon the face of the earth. The misguided makers had finally experienced for one brief instant the total power that they had so long craved, and thereby brought final destruction upon Atlantis, including themselves. Out of the scores of coward ships sent out upon the waters, only 11 made it to their preordained destination. They were the ones fated to become the seeds of new advanced civilizations throughout the planet. Once again, it was indeed a tragic and terrible time for planet Earth. But lest you forget and still mourn the death of fair Atlantis, within your heart, please see that Atlantis liveth yet within our consciousness even today as you read these words. Yes, I say unto you that Atlantis has surely risen. The final days of Atlantis do not lie buried somewhere in the distant past. That was only to demonstrate to us the lesson. It is right now in this present age that we are facing the ultimate test this time, so it entails the survival of the entire planet. There is a particularly strong lesson in this for those who used to be among the makers in that faraway time. Is this not the great opportunity that you have been yearning to make amends for the harm that you created in the past? Understand that you shall not be given another opportunity like the one facing you right now. There is no more time for you to perpetrate the incorrect thought forms that caused the original downfall of Atlantis. You must find the proper balance between the intellect and the heart. Please set aside your famed Atlantean arrogance and develop compassion, not only for humanity but for all of the life forms upon your planet before it's too late. To all of you who read these words, please remember that today we're playing the final days of Atlantis. We are given this golden opportunity to recreate the past in a more positive direction, to be the agents of healing rather than destruction, and to move the planetary consciousness fully into oneness. The choice stands before each and every one here upon planet Earth, and I ask you which way will you choose to go?